Baby found a bear cub stuck in a craft store display. What Baby did next crafted miracles. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Meadowbrook Craft Store, casting long shadows between the colorful aisles filled with ribbons, buttons, and endless spools of thread. It was the kind of light that made dust particles dance like tiny fairies in the air, and 3-year-old Lily Morgan watched them with wide, curious eyes as her father Ethan pushed the shopping cart slowly through the store. They had come for simple supplies, just some glue and construction paper for a weekend project. But Lily had that look on her face, the one that meant she had spotted something extraordinary in the ordinary world around her. Her small hand tugged at her father's shirt, and she pointed toward the back corner of the store where the seasonal displays stood tall and forgotten from last winter's collection. "Daddy, look," she whispered, her voice carrying that special quality that only young children possess, a mixture of wonder and absolute certainty. Ethan followed her gaze to where an elaborate display of yarn art stood, featuring various knitted and crocheted animals arranged in what was meant to be a winter forest scene. But Lily wasn't looking at the display as a whole. Her attention was fixed on something specific, something that made her let go of the cart and toddle forward with determined little steps. There, partially hidden behind cascading skeins of silvery blue yarn, was what appeared to be a small bear cub, no bigger than a teddy bear, but somehow different from all the other crafted creatures around it. The bear seemed tangled in the yarn, its small form wrapped and twisted in ways that made it look almost trapped. Its fur wasn't fur at all, but rather a complex weaving of brown and golden threads that caught the light in peculiar ways, creating an illusion of breathing, of life. 2 button eyes, one black and one deep amber, stared out from the tangle with what Lily insisted was sadness. Ethan smiled at his daughter's imagination, reaching out to touch what he assumed was just another craft store creation. But his hand stopped midway when he noticed something odd. The temperature around the display was different, warmer somehow. And there was a faint humming in the air, like the sound of distant bees or perhaps the vibration of something alive. "It's stuck, Daddy," Lily said matter-of-factly, already reaching into the display with her tiny hands. "We need to help it." Ethan wanted to tell her it was just a toy, just yarn and buttons cleverly arranged, but something in the way the light bent around the small creature made him pause. The store around them seemed quieter than it had been moments before, as if the very air was holding its breath. Other customers moved past them in the aisles, but their footsteps sounded muffled, distant, like echoes from another room. Lily's fingers found the edge of the yarn tangle, and she began to work with the patience and concentration that only children possess when they believe something truly important is at stake. As she pulled gently at the silver strands, something remarkable began to happen. The button eyes seemed to track her movements, following her hands as she worked. Ethan told himself it was just the way the light was hitting them, just an optical illusion created by the angle and the shadows. But deep down, in that part of him that still remembered what it was like to believe in magic, he knew better. The yarn began to loosen under Lily's touch, unraveling in ways that seemed impossible, as if it was helping her, cooperating with her small fingers. Each strand that came free seemed to glow for just a moment. A soft golden light that pulsed once before fading back to normal. "See, Daddy, it wants out," Lily said, never taking her eyes off her work. Her voice carried no doubt, no question that what she was doing was real and necessary. Ethan found himself kneeling beside her, drawn into whatever strange moment they had stumbled upon. The craft store continued around them, normal and mundane, but their little corner had become something else entirely. He watched as his daughter worked with incredible focus, her usually clumsy toddler hands moving with unexpected grace and precision. The yarn continued to unwind, revealing more of the creature beneath. What emerged was unlike anything Ethan had seen in a craft store before. The bear's body was intricately woven, yes, but there was something more to it. Patterns within patterns revealed themselves as the yarn fell away. Geometric designs that seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. The creature's chest rose and fell in a rhythm that couldn't possibly be real, yet undeniably was. Lily reached for a pair of child-safe scissors from a nearby display, the plastic kind with rounded edges that couldn't cut paper properly, let alone yarn. But as she brought them close to a particularly tight knot, the yarn seemed to part on its own, as if cut by something much sharper. "Careful, sweetheart," Ethan heard himself say, though he wasn't sure what he was warning her about. The rational part of his mind kept insisting this was all some elaborate animatronic display, perhaps a new product demonstration he hadn't heard about. But no machine could explain the warmth he felt emanating from the creature, or the way its button eyes seemed to hold genuine emotion. As more yarn fell away, he could see that the bear's body was hollow in places, filled with what looked like constellation patterns made from tiny beads and sequins that caught and reflected light in impossible ways. Lily paused in her work, tilting her head as if listening to something. "It says, 'Thank you,'" she announced, then continued pulling at the threads. Ethan wanted to ask her how she knew that, what she meant, but the words stuck in his throat. The air around them had taken on a quality he could only describe as thick with possibility, as if reality had become negotiable in this small corner of the craft store. He glanced around, expecting to see other shoppers stopping to stare at the strange scene, but everyone continued past without a second glance, as if Lily and the bear existed in a bubble separate from the rest of the world. The creature's paw moved. It was subtle, just a small shift, but both Ethan and Lily saw it. The little girl giggled with delight, not surprised at all, while Ethan felt his understanding of the world tilt slightly off its axis. The paw moved again, this time clearly reaching toward Lily's hand. When their fingers met, or rather, when Lily's finger touched the woven paw, a spark of light passed between them. Not electricity, not static, but something warmer, gentler. The button eyes blinked, actually blinked, the amber one first, then the black one, like a slow, grateful wink. "It needs more help," Lily declared, looking around the store with purpose. She grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward the bead aisle, the bear creature somehow following, though Ethan couldn't quite see how it moved. One moment it was in the display, the next it was beside them, leaving a faint trail of golden thread in its wake. In the bead aisle, Lily selected specific colors with the certainty of an artist who knows exactly what their creation needs. She chose deep blues and purples, silver and gold, and one special bead that seemed to contain all the colors of sunset within its small surface. Back at the display, Lily began what could only be described as repair work, though it looked more like she was adding to the creature rather than fixing it. She pressed beads into spaces in its woven body, and each one seemed to bring more life to the bear. The patterns on its surface began to move, swirling slowly like galaxies in miniature. Ethan watched, transfixed, as his 3-year-old daughter performed what looked like an ancient ritual with modern craft supplies. She hummed as she worked, a tune he didn't recognize, something that sounded both new and impossibly old. The bear began to glow more steadily now, not with harsh light but with a soft luminescence that reminded Ethan of fireflies on summer evenings. Its woven chest expanded and contracted more obviously, and he could swear he heard something like a heartbeat, though it sounded more like the rhythm of waves on a distant shore. Lily added glitter next, sprinkling it over the creature with the solemnity of someone performing a blessing. The glitter didn't fall normally. Instead, it seemed to orbit the bear for a moment before settling into its weave, adding depth and dimension to patterns that were already defying logical explanation. "Almost done," Lily said, though Ethan hadn't asked. She reached for one final item. A spool of golden thread that seemed to glow on its own even before she touched it. As her fingers wrapped around it, the thread began to unspool on its own, wrapping around the bear in complex patterns that no 3-year-old should know how to create. Yet Lily guided it with confidence, her small hands directing the thread as if she had done this 1,000 times before. The golden thread wove through the bear's form, connecting all the beads, all the glitter, all the different yarns into one cohesive whole. When the last strand was in place, something shifted in the air. The humming sound grew louder for just a moment, reaching a crescendo that Ethan felt more than heard, and then silence fell. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of potential, pregnant with magic about to be born. The bear's button eyes were no longer buttons. They had transformed into something that looked almost like real eyes, deep and knowing, filled with an intelligence that was both animal and something more. The creature stood on its own now, no longer needing the support of the display, its woven legs steady and sure. Lily clapped her hands in delight, and the sound seemed to break whatever spell had been holding the moment in place. The bear took a step forward, then another, its movements fluid despite being made entirely of craft materials. It approached Lily and, in a gesture so human it made Ethan's breath catch, bowed its head in what could only be gratitude. Lily giggled and patted its head, and where her hand touched, the weave seemed to shimmer and strengthen, becoming more real with each passing second. "It wants to show us something," Lily announced, taking the bear's paw in one hand and Ethan's hand in the other. Before Ethan could protest or question or try to make sense of any of this, they were moving through the store, but not in any way he understood. The aisles seemed to stretch and bend. The ceiling rose higher, and the light became something tangible that they moved through rather than simply existed in. The bear led them to a section of the store Ethan had never noticed before, though he'd been here dozens of times. It was filled with supplies he didn't recognize, threads that contained starlight, beads that held entire worlds within them, and papers that showed different images depending on the angle of view. The bear began to create. Using its paws, which had become surprisingly dexterous, it pulled materials from the shelves and began to craft. But this wasn't simple crafting. This was creation on a level Ethan had never imagined. The bear wove threads into shapes that existed in more than 3 dimensions, created patterns that told stories without words, built structures that seemed to contain actual spaces within them, despite being no larger than a shoebox. Lily watched with rapt attention, occasionally adding her own touches, a bead here, a ribbon there, each addition perfect in ways Ethan couldn't articulate. As the bear worked, Ethan began to understand something, though he couldn't have explained it if asked. The creature wasn't just creating art. It was showing them something about the nature of creation itself. Every loop of thread was a connection, every bead a world, every pattern a possibility. The bear was teaching them, or perhaps reminding them, that magic wasn't something separate from the everyday world but woven through it, hidden in plain sight in craft stores and children's imaginations, and the space between what we see and what we believe. Time moved strangely in that hidden section of the store. Ethan's watch showed that only minutes had passed, but it felt like hours, or perhaps days, or possibly just seconds stretched out like taffy. The bear continued its work, creating a tapestry that seemed to tell the story of everything. From the birth of stars to the laughter of children, from the first spark of creativity to the last breath of wonder. Lily added pieces throughout, never hesitating, always knowing exactly what was needed, her 3-year-old hands guided by something ancient and wise. When the tapestry was complete, it was both enormous and tiny, both there and not there, existing in a state that Ethan's mind couldn't quite grasp, but his heart understood perfectly. The bear stepped back, its work done, and looked at them with those impossible eyes. In them, Ethan saw gratitude, yes, but also something more. He saw recognition, as if the bear had been waiting for them, for Lily specifically, for this exact moment in this exact place. The creature reached out with one paw and touched the tapestry, and it began to glow with a light that was every color and no color all at once. "It's going home now," Lily said softly, and there was a sadness in her voice that made Ethan's heart ache. The bear nodded, a gesture so human it no longer seemed strange, and began to walk toward the tapestry. As it moved, its form began to change, becoming less solid, more light than substance. The threads that made up its body began to unweave, but not in a way that suggested destruction. Instead, each thread seemed to be returning to something, joining with the light of the tapestry, becoming part of a larger whole. But before it disappeared completely, the bear turned back to them one last time. It reached into its own chest, into the hollow space filled with constellation patterns, and pulled out 2 small objects. To Lily, it gave a tiny woven heart that pulsed with soft golden light. To Ethan, it gave a single bead that contained what looked like an entire galaxy spinning slowly within its depths. Then, with what could only be described as a smile, despite having no real mouth, the bear stepped into the tapestry and became part of it, its essence spreading through the patterns like water soaking into cloth. The tapestry hung in the air for a moment longer, showing them wonders beyond description, then slowly faded from view. The hidden section of the store faded with it, and Ethan found himself standing in the familiar craft store once again, Lily's hand in his, both of them looking at an ordinary display of yarn animals. But in Lily's other hand, the woven heart still glowed softly, and in Ethan's pocket, he could feel the weight of the galaxy bead, proof that it had all been real. Around them, the store continued its normal business, customers browsing, children laughing, the cash registers beeping in the distance. "Daddy," Lily said, looking up at him with eyes that seemed older than her 3 years. "Can we come back tomorrow? There might be others who need help." Ethan looked down at his daughter, at the certainty in her face, at the gentle glow of the heart in her hand, and nodded. How could he say no? How could he deny what they had just experienced? As they walked toward the exit, Lily chattering about the bear and what other creatures might need their help, Ethan noticed something. The other customers, the ones who had seemed oblivious to the magic happening right beside them, were looking at Lily with soft smiles, as if they could sense something special about her even if they couldn't see it directly. The store manager, a woman named Jessica Brooks, who had always been friendly but distant, approached them as they neared the door. "Found everything you needed?" she asked, but there was something in her eyes, a knowing look that made Ethan wonder. Lily held up her glowing heart, and Jessica's smile widened. "Ah, I see you found the special section. Not everyone can, you know, only those who still believe." She winked at Lily, then handed Ethan a small business card. But when he looked at it, instead of store information, it simply said, "For those who see beyond the visible, return when the heart calls." They left the store, stepping out into the late afternoon sun, but the world looked different now. Ethan could see threads of connection everywhere, between people, between objects, between the earth and sky. They were faint, barely visible, but they were there. Lily skipped beside him, humming that strange tune again, the woven heart bouncing against her chest where she had hung it on a ribbon. "The bear is happy now," she said suddenly. "It's part of everything again. But there are others, Daddy. Others who got stuck between here and there. We have to help them too." As they drove home, Ethan found himself thinking about his own childhood, about the things he used to believe before the world taught him they were impossible. But here was his daughter, proving that impossible was just another word for hasn't happened yet. The galaxy bead in his pocket seemed to pulse with warmth, and when he glanced at it while stopped at a red light, he could swear the galaxy inside was moving, stars being born and dying in an endless cycle of creation. Lily was singing now, a song without words that seemed to harmonize with something Ethan could almost hear, a frequency of the universe that most adults had forgotten how to tune into. That night, as Ethan tucked Lily into bed, she placed the woven heart on her nightstand where it continued to glow softly, casting gentle shadows that looked like dancing figures on the walls. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "the bear left us a message in the heart. It says that every time someone creates something with love, a little bit of magic enters the world. And if enough people create with love, the whole world becomes magical again." She yawned, her eyes already closing. "We're going to help make the world magical again, aren't we, Daddy?" Ethan kissed her forehead, feeling the weight of her words, the truth of them resonating in his bones. "Yes, sweetheart, we are." As he turned to leave, he noticed something on Lily's desk, something that hadn't been there before. It was a small piece of paper made from that strange material they had seen in the hidden section of the store. On it was a drawing, but not done in any medium he recognized. It showed Lily and him, standing in the craft store, but around them were dozens of other creatures, all made of different materials, all waiting. At the bottom, in handwriting that seemed to shift between childlike and ancient, were the words, "The helpers have been found. The awakening begins." Ethan stood there for a long moment, looking at the drawing, feeling the galaxy bead pulse in his pocket, listening to Lily's peaceful breathing and the soft hum of the glowing heart. The world had changed today, or perhaps he had simply started seeing it as it always was. Either way, he knew that tomorrow they would return to the craft store, and they would look for others who needed help. Because Lily was right, there was magic in creation, in the act of making something with love and intention. And maybe, just maybe, if they helped enough trapped creatures find their way home, they could help others remember how to see the magic too. The moonlight streamed through Lily's window, and for just a moment, Ethan could swear he saw threads of silver light connecting everything in the room, including him and his daughter, to something vast and beautiful beyond the walls, beyond the town, beyond the sky itself. The galaxy bead grew warm in his hand, and he understood that they had become part of something ancient and ongoing, a story that had been waiting for them to discover it. As he quietly closed Lily's door, he heard her murmur in her sleep, "Thank you, bear friend. We'll help the others. I promise." The next morning came with a sense of anticipation that Ethan hadn't felt since he was a child himself. Lily was up before dawn, already dressed and holding her glowing heart, which had somehow become even brighter overnight. "They're calling us, Daddy," she said simply, and Ethan didn't question how she knew. They ate a quick breakfast, though neither of them was really hungry, their bodies humming with an energy that seemed to come from somewhere else. The galaxy bead in Ethan's pocket had been spinning faster all morning, its internal cosmos accelerating as if approaching something important. When they arrived at the craft store, it had just opened, and Jessica Brooks was standing at the entrance as if waiting for them. "I had a feeling you'd be back early," she said with that knowing smile. "The store is different in the morning. More alive, you might say, especially for those who can see." She gestured for them to enter, and as they did, Ethan immediately noticed what she meant. The light was different. Not just the angle of it, but its quality. It seemed to breathe, to pulse with a rhythm that matched the beating of his heart. And there were sounds, subtle but present, like whispers in languages he didn't recognize but somehow understood. Lily led the way this time, her small feet moving with purpose through the aisles. She stopped suddenly in front of a display of wooden crafts, her head tilted in that listening way. "Here," she said, pointing to what looked like an ordinary wooden puppet, the kind with strings that children played with. But as Ethan looked closer, he saw that the strings weren't attached to anything. They simply faded into the air above the puppet, disappearing into nothing. Or perhaps not nothing, perhaps into something his eyes couldn't quite follow. The puppet's painted face was frozen in an expression of longing, its wooden eyes somehow conveying deep sadness despite being merely paint on wood. "It's been waiting so long," Lily said, already reaching for the puppet. As her fingers touched the wood, something remarkable happened. The paint on its face began to move, the eyes blinking slowly as if waking from a long sleep. The strings above it became visible, but they weren't ordinary strings. They were threads of light, extending upward into dimensions that hurt Ethan's eyes to look at directly. Lily began to work with the strings, her movements looking almost like she was playing an invisible harp, and with each motion, the puppet became more animated, more alive. But this was different from the bear. The puppet seemed to be fighting against something, its movements jerky and constrained. Lily frowned in concentration, and Ethan heard her whisper, "I understand. Someone tied you wrong. Someone tried to control you instead of letting you dance." Her small fingers worked with incredible precision, untying knots that existed in more than just the physical strings. Each knot she released sent a ripple through the air, and the puppet's movements became smoother, more graceful. Other customers walked past, but again, none seemed to notice the miracle occurring right in front of them. As Lily worked, the puppet began to dance, its wooden feet tapping out rhythms that seemed to echo from somewhere far away. Its painted face was transforming, becoming more expressive, more real with each passing moment. And then Ethan heard it, faint but clear. The puppet was humming. The same tune Lily had been humming yesterday, that ancient melody that seemed to come from the very fabric of reality itself. Lily giggled and began to hum along, and their harmonies created something that made the air shimmer with possibility. "It needs a stage," Lily declared suddenly, looking around the store. She spotted a small display table that had been cleared of products and pulled Ethan toward it. Together, they lifted the puppet, which was now moving entirely on its own, onto the table. The moment its feet touched the surface, the table began to change. The plain wood became polished and decorated with patterns that swirled and shifted. Tiny lights appeared around its edges. Not electric lights, but something older, like captured starlight. The puppet began to perform, its dance telling a story without words. A story of being trapped, of longing for freedom, of finally finding those who could see and help. As it danced, something extraordinary began to happen. Other items in the store began to respond. A cloth doll on a nearby shelf turned its head to watch. A stuffed dragon's glass eyes began to glow with inner fire. A collection of paper butterflies started to flutter their wings, despite being made of nothing but folded origami. Lily clapped her hands in delight, but not in surprise. She had expected this, Ethan realized. She had known that helping one would awaken others. The store was full of them, creatures caught between worlds, waiting for someone who could see them, who could help them return to wherever they truly belonged. The puppet's dance reached a crescendo, its movements becoming so fast they blurred. The strings of light above it began to pull, not controlling it but lifting it, carrying it upward. The puppet looked at Lily one last time, and though its face was still painted wood, Ethan could swear he saw it smile with genuine joy. Then it rose, passing through the ceiling as if it wasn't there, the strings of light pulling it home to whatever dimension it had originally come from. Where it had been, a small wooden heart remained. Similar to the woven one the bear had given Lily, but carved with intricate patterns that seemed to tell the puppet's entire story. Lily picked up the wooden heart and added it to the woven one hanging around her neck. The two hearts began to glow in synchronization, their lights playing off each other in complex patterns. "Two down," she said, with the seriousness of someone much older. "But look, Daddy, look at all the others waking up." And indeed, throughout the store, Ethan could now see dozens of objects that weren't quite what they seemed. Some were obvious, like the cloth doll that was now walking along its shelf. Others were subtle, like a ball of yarn that was unraveling and re-raveling itself in patterns that spoke of consciousness. Jessica Brooks appeared beside them, and Ethan noticed she was carrying a cup of something that steamed with colors rather than heat. "You're naturals at this," she said, offering the cup to Lily, who took a sip and giggled as rainbow vapor puffed from her nose. "I've been watching over this store for 15 years, waiting for the right helpers to arrive. You see, this isn't just a craft store. It's a way station, a place where creations that have gained too much love, too much belief, too much creative energy, sometimes get stuck between being simple objects and being something more." She gestured around the store, and Ethan began to see it differently. The aisles weren't just organized by product type, they were organized by levels of consciousness, by how close each object was to awakening. "Every time someone creates something with true love and intention," Jessica continued, "they put a piece of magic into it. Usually, that magic stays dormant, but sometimes, especially when children play with these creations, believing in them completely, they wake up. And when they wake up, they need to go home, back to the dimension of living ideas, where they can exist fully as what they've become." "But why do they get stuck?" Ethan asked, his scientific mind still trying to make sense of what he was experiencing. Jessica smiled sadly. "Because most people stop believing. The magic gets trapped between belief and disbelief, between being seen and being invisible. That's where you and Lily come in. She can see them because she still believes completely. And you're learning to believe again through her eyes. Together, you can help them complete their journey." As if to demonstrate, Lily had already moved to another display, this time a collection of felt animals. One in particular, a small elephant made of purple felt with sequin decorations, was trembling slightly. Lily reached out to it, and the elephant practically jumped into her arms. "This one's scared," she said, holding it gently. "It's been awake for a long time but didn't know what to do." She began to sing to it. That wordless melody that seemed to be the universal language of these awakened creations. The elephant's trembling stopped, and its felt trunk reached up to touch Lily's cheek in what could only be described as gratitude. But this one needed something different. Instead of wanting to leave immediately, the elephant seemed to want to explore first. Lily set it down, and it began to walk around the store on its tiny felt legs, examining everything with what appeared to be wonder. It stopped at various displays, touching other creations with its trunk, and where it touched, sparks of awareness seemed to pass. A wooden train began to move on its own, chugging silently along an invisible track. A set of nesting dolls began to open and close themselves, each revealing a different expression on their painted faces. The store was coming alive, piece by piece, creation by creation. "We should probably work systematically," Jessica suggested, though she was smiling at the chaos beginning to unfold. "Some of these creations have been waiting for decades. There's a whole section in the back that I've had to close off because the awakening energy was getting too concentrated." She led them through the store, past aisles where more and more objects were showing signs of consciousness. A knitted scarf was weaving itself into different patterns. A set of ceramic bells was playing a harmony that no human hand was creating. The very air seemed to thicken with magic, with possibility, with the weight of so many creations on the verge of transformation. The back section Jessica mentioned was behind a door marked Employees Only, but when she opened it, Ethan saw it was anything but a typical storage room. It was vast, much larger than the store itself should have been able to contain. The ceiling stretched up into darkness, and the walls were lined with shelves that seemed to go on forever, and everything, absolutely everything in this space was moving, glowing, or showing some sign of life. It was overwhelming and beautiful, and slightly terrifying all at once. "This is where I keep the ones that are fully awake but can't find their way home on their own," Jessica explained. "Some have been here since the store opened. They need someone with the gift to help them transition." Lily walked forward fearlessly, her two hearts glowing brighter in response to the concentrated magic in the room. The creations seemed to sense her presence, and a path cleared through them, leading to the center of the space where something large was covered with a cloth that sparkled with its own inner light. "That one," Jessica said quietly, "has been here the longest. It was created by a woman named Savannah Reed, who put so much love and grief into it after losing her daughter that it became something unprecedented. I've never been able to help it because it needs someone who understands both joy and loss, creation and letting go. It needs someone like Lily, who sees with a pure heart, and someone like you, Ethan, who's learning to believe again despite knowing loss." Ethan felt a chill run through him. How did Jessica know about his loss? About Sarah, Lily's mother, who had died when Lily was just a baby? But before he could ask, Lily had reached the covered object and was pulling at the cloth. What was revealed took Ethan's breath away. It was a tapestry, but not just any tapestry. It was a living story, its threads constantly weaving and reweaving themselves to show different scenes. And in every scene was a woman who looked remarkably like Sarah, playing with a child who looked remarkably like Lily. "Oh," Lily breathed, reaching out to touch it. "It's so sad and so happy at the same time." The tapestry responded to her touch, the scenes shifting to show the woman and child in various moments of joy, but always with a sense of separation, as if they existed in different dimensions that could see each other but never quite touch. Ethan felt tears on his cheeks, understanding suddenly that this creation had absorbed not just Savannah Reed's grief, but the grief of everyone who had ever lost someone they loved. "It doesn't want to leave," Lily said, her voice wise beyond her years. "It wants to become a bridge. It wants to help people see that love doesn't end when someone goes away. It just changes shape." She began to work with the tapestry, not trying to send it away, but helping it transform. Her small hands guided the threads, and gradually, the tapestry began to change. Instead of showing scenes of separation, it began to show connections, threads of light linking the figures even when they were apart. It was becoming something new, not a creation that needed to go home, but one that had found its purpose here, in this in-between space. As Lily worked, other creations in the room began to gather around, drawn by what was happening. The felt elephant from earlier climbed onto Ethan's shoulder to watch. The wooden train circled them, creating a boundary of gentle motion. The nesting dolls arranged themselves in a circle, each one reflecting a different emotion on their painted faces. And through it all, that mysterious melody hummed in the air, now being sung not just by Lily but by every awakened creation in the room, a chorus of the impossible made real. The tapestry's transformation was complete. It had become a window, or perhaps a door, or perhaps simply a reminder that the boundaries between dimensions, between life and death, between real and imaginary, were far more fluid than most people believed. Savannah Reed's creation had found its purpose not in leaving, but in staying. In being a beacon for others who needed to remember that love transcends all boundaries. Jessica was crying openly now, and she reached out to touch the tapestry. 20 years, she whispered. 20 years I've been trying to help it, and all it needed was a child's understanding and a father's love. The room began to change around them. The creations that had been waiting, stuck, lost, began to find their own ways. Some, like the bear from yesterday, needed to return to wherever awakened creations belonged. Others, like the tapestry, needed to find their purpose in this world, and Lily, with her pure sight and gentle heart, seemed to know instinctively which was which. She moved through the room like a small conductor, guiding each creation to its proper destination. Some she helped dissolve into light, sending them home with joy. Others she helped settle into new purposes, becoming guardians and guides for future creators. Ethan watched his daughter work, this tiny 3-year-old who somehow understood mysteries that most adults couldn't even perceive. The galaxy bead in his pocket was spinning so fast now it had become warm, almost hot. And when he pulled it out, he saw that the galaxy inside had evolved. Stars had formed planets, and on one of those planets, if he looked closely enough, he could see tiny figures that looked like all the creations they had helped, living in a world where imagination was the fundamental force of nature. "That's where they go," Jessica said, noticing what he was looking at. "Your bear friend is there, and the puppet, and all the others who needed to return. It's not really a different dimension, more like a different frequency of this one. Children can see it sometimes, in their dreams, in their play. That's why children's imaginary friends seem so real to them, because on some level they are." She paused, then added, "Lily is special, though. She doesn't just see that world, she can bridge it. She's what we call a creator's guide, someone who helps creations find their way. They're born maybe once in a generation, and they usually lose the ability as they grow older and stop believing." "But not always?" Ethan asked, thinking of Jessica, who clearly could see what Lily saw. Jessica smiled. "Not always. Sometimes, if they're very lucky, they find a way to keep the sight. Usually by working in places like this, where the veil is thin, where creation happens every day. I've been waiting for another guide to appear, someone to train, someone to carry on the work when I no longer can. I think I've found her." Lily had finished her work in the back room. Most of the creations had found their paths, either home or to new purposes. The room itself looked different now, less crowded, but more alive, as if the very air was celebrating. The felt elephant had decided to stay, becoming Lily's companion, riding on her shoulder as she walked back to them. "There are more," Lily said simply. "Not just here, everywhere, in every place where people create with love. They're waking up faster now. The world is remembering how to believe." As they prepared to leave the back room, Ethan noticed something he hadn't seen before. On the walls were photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Each showed a person with a creation, and in each photo, the creation was clearly alive, clearly conscious, though the people in the photos might not have known it. Every guide who's ever worked here, Jessica explained. Going back to when this building was first built, it's always been a way station, just disguised as different shops over the years. A millinery, a toy store, a bookshop, now a craft store, places where creation happens, where love is woven into objects. One photograph caught Ethan's eye. It was old, sepia-toned, and it showed a young girl who looked remarkably like Lily, holding what appeared to be the same woven heart his daughter now wore. "That's my great-grandmother," Jessica said, following his gaze. "She was a guide, too. The heart has been passed down. Waiting for the right person, it seems it's found her." Lily touched the woven heart, and it pulsed with warmth. "It's happy," she said. "It's been waiting to work again." They returned to the main store, which had become a wonderland of awakening creations. Customers were shopping, oblivious to the magic happening around them, though Ethan noticed that children kept stopping and staring, their eyes wide with wonder at things their parents couldn't see. One little boy was having an animated conversation with a sock puppet that was definitely responding on its own. A girl was carefully selecting beads while a small beaded butterfly whispered suggestions in her ear. The children could see, even if they didn't fully understand what they were seeing. "This is how it spreads," Jessica explained. "Children who encounter awakened creations, even briefly, carry a spark of that magic with them. They grow up a little more open to possibility, a little more likely to believe. Some of them will become artists, writers, musicians, creators of all kinds, and their creations will carry extra magic because of these early encounters. It's a cycle, you see. Magic creating more magic. Belief fostering more belief." Lily was already at work again, drawn to a display of clay figures. One in particular, a small dragon with meticulously carved scales, was showing signs of awakening. Its clay eyes were beginning to glow with inner fire, and small puffs of what looked like steam were coming from its nostrils. But this one was different. It was fighting its awakening, afraid of what it was becoming. Lily sat down cross-legged in front of it, her voice gentle and encouraging. "It's okay to be scared," she told it. "Becoming real is scary, but it's also wonderful. You get to choose who you want to be." The dragon slowly began to relax, its clay form becoming more flexible, more alive. It stretched its wings, which shouldn't have been able to move since they were solid clay, but move they did. It took a tentative step, then another, its movements becoming more confident with each one. Finally, it approached Lily and nuzzled against her hand. Its clay surface warmed to the touch. This one, Ethan could tell, wouldn't be leaving. It had found its purpose here, with Lily, helping her help others. As the day wore on, they helped dozens more creations. Some were simple, just needing a gentle touch to complete their journey. Others were complex, requiring patience and understanding. A quilted blanket that had absorbed the dreams of everyone who had ever slept under it needed help sorting through the tangle of experiences. A set of painted stones that had been charged with wishes by children at a birthday party needed guidance on whether to grant those wishes or simply hold them safe. Each creation was unique. Each had its own story, its own needs, its own destination. By afternoon, Lily was tired but happy, surrounded by the creations that had chosen to stay with her. Besides the felt elephant and the clay dragon, there was now a paper crane that could fold itself into different shapes, a button that could show different images on its surface like a tiny television, and a piece of ribbon that could tie itself into knots that spelled out messages. They were her helpers, Jessica explained, creations that had chosen to assist a guide in their work. Every guide accumulated such helpers over time, each one offering different abilities and perspectives. "We should go home now," Ethan said, noticing how heavy Lily's eyes were getting. She had done more magic in one day than most people did in a lifetime. But as they prepared to leave, Jessica stopped them. "Wait," she said, "there's one more thing." She led them to the front of the store, to a section Ethan had walked past 100 times without really seeing. It was full of blank canvases, empty notebooks, unused clay, fresh yarn. "These are for you," Jessica said, "for both of you. Start creating. With what you now know, with what you can now see, your creations will be special from the start. They'll be bridges between worlds, helpers for future guides, beacons of possibility." Lily, despite her exhaustion, immediately reached for a ball of rainbow yarn. "I want to make a friend for someone who's lonely," she said. Ethan found himself drawn to a notebook, its pages pristine and full of potential. "I want to write down what we've seen," he said, "so others might learn to see it too." Jessica smiled and began to ring up their purchases. But when Ethan reached for his wallet, she shook her head. "Guides and their companions never pay here," she said. "You've already given more than enough by helping our awakened friends find their ways." As they left the store, arms full of creative supplies and hearts full of wonder, Ethan looked back to see Jessica in the window, waving. But she wasn't alone. All around her, visible now to his newly opened eyes, were creations. Some were leaving through the walls, heading home to their dimension of living imagination. Others were settling in for the long haul, choosing to remain and help future generations discover the magic. And in the center of it all was the tapestry they had helped transform, glowing with a light that seemed to say that love, creativity, and belief were the most powerful forces in any universe. The 2 chapters of mentioned part has completed. The second day brought new understanding. Lily woke with her collection of helper creations arranged around her bed like guardians, each one glowing softly in the dawn light. The felt elephant had spent the night walking around her room, examining her toys and apparently explaining to them about the possibility of awakening. The clay dragon had curled up on her pillow, its warm presence giving her dreams of flying through dimensions made of pure creativity. The paper crane had folded itself into different shapes throughout the night, each form telling a different part of a story only Lily could fully understand. "They're teaching me," Lily explained to Ethan over breakfast, as the button that could show images displayed swirling galaxies on its surface. "While I sleep, they show me things. How to see better, how to help better. The elephant says there are creations everywhere that need help, not just in the store, in museums, in attics, in toy boxes that haven't been opened for years." She paused, then added with the seriousness only a 3-year-old could muster, "We have a lot of work to do, Daddy." Ethan had spent the night writing in his new notebook, trying to capture what they had experienced. But every time he wrote a sentence, the words seemed to shimmer and rearrange themselves, telling the story from angles he hadn't considered. The notebook itself was becoming awakened, he realized, infused with the magic of their experiences. When he showed it to Lily, she giggled. "It wants to tell the story too," she said. "Let it help." So Ethan began to write differently, not trying to control the narrative, but collaborating with it. And the story that emerged was far more beautiful and true than anything he could have created alone. They returned to the craft store, but this time, Jessica met them with someone new. A boy, maybe 8 years old, named Connor Adams, whose eyes held the same seeing that Lily's did. "Connor's been coming here for years," Jessica explained. He can see them too, but he's been afraid to help them, afraid of what others might think. I thought maybe Lily could show him it's okay. Connor was shy at first, but when Lily's felt elephant walked over to him and offered its trunk in greeting, his face lit up with wonder and relief. "You can really see them too?" Connor asked. And when Lily nodded, he nearly cried with relief. "Everyone says I'm making things up. My parents think I need therapy because I talk to my toys, but they talk back. They're real." Lily took his hand with the natural compassion children have for each other's pain. "They are real," she said firmly, "and they need our help. Want to help me wake up a whole shelf of them?" Connor nodded eagerly, and together they approached a display of stuffed animals that had been donated by various customers over the years. The donated toys were different from the new creations. They carried the weight of love and loss, of children who had grown up and moved on, of memories both joyful and bittersweet. Many of them were partially awakened, caught in a limbo of consciousness, aware enough to feel abandoned, but not aware enough to understand what had happened to them. Lily and Connor worked together, with Lily's natural gift complementing Connor's years of observation. He knew which ones had been loved the most, which ones carried the strongest memories, which ones were ready to wake fully, and which ones preferred to sleep. One teddy bear in particular caught their attention. It was worn and patched, missing an eye, with stuffing poking out of several seams, but it radiated a warmth that even Ethan could feel from several feet away. "This one's been loved by many children," Connor said, his voice reverent. "I can see their fingerprints in its fur, like golden threads." Lily nodded and reached for the bear, but as soon as she touched it, something unexpected happened. Instead of awakening gradually like the others, the bear immediately burst into full consciousness, its remaining eye blazing with an intensity that made everyone step back. "Finally," the bear said, its voice rough but clear, and everyone in the store heard it, not just those with the sight. Customers stopped mid-shopping, turning to stare at the talking bear in shock. 70 years I've been waiting. 70 years of being passed from child to child, each one believing in me completely, each one adding to what I am, and now, finally, guides who can hear me properly." The bear stood up on its worn legs, stuffing still poking out, and performed a perfect bow. "My name is Mr. Patches, and I have been collecting stories from children since 1954. Jessica quickly ushered them all into the back room before the situation could escalate with the other customers, though Ethan noticed several children dragging their parents toward where the bear had been, insisting they had heard it talk. In the safety of the back room, Mr. Patches began to tell his story. He had been created by a grandmother for her first grandchild, sewn with such love that he had been conscious from his very first stitch. But, unlike other awakened creations, he had chosen to stay in this world, passing from child to child, collecting their stories, their dreams, their fears and hopes. "I'm a repository," Mr. Patches explained, his one eye somehow managing to convey decades of wisdom. "Every child who's ever held me I remember. Every tear they've cried into my fur, every secret they've whispered to me at night, every adventure they've imagined us having together. I carry it all, and now I think it's time to give these stories back to the world. But I need help. The stories are getting heavy, you see, too many for one bear to hold." As he spoke, Ethan could see them. Faint impressions in the air around the bear. Thousands of moments, thousands of children, thousands of stories waiting to be told. Lily understood immediately. You need to share them. Put them in other creations so they can carry the stories forward. Mr. Patches nodded gratefully. Exactly, young guide, but not just any creations. they need to go to the right ones, the ones that will find their way to children who need those specific stories. A story about overcoming fear needs to find a child facing their own fears. A story about loss needs to find a child learning to grieve. Can you help me do this? What followed was perhaps the most complex magic Ethan had witnessed yet. Lily and Connor, with Mr. Patches guiding them, began to transfer stories from the old bear into other creations in the store. It wasn't just a matter of moving them. Each story had to be matched carefully with the right vessel. A wooden horse received the story of a child who had dreamed of adventure. A rag doll absorbed the tale of a lonely girl who had found friendship. A set of building blocks took in the memories of a boy who had used them to build castles where his deceased father could still visit him in imagination. As each story found its new home, the creation that received it began to glow with purpose. They weren't just awakened, they were awakened with a mission. They knew exactly which child they needed to find, which heart they needed to heal, which imagination they needed to inspire. Some immediately began moving toward the front of the store, drawn by an invisible pull toward their destined children. Others settled in to wait, knowing their child hadn't been born yet or hadn't arrived at the moment when they would need the story. The process took hours, and as it continued, more people with the sight began to arrive at the store. Word was spreading, Jessica explained, through networks that existed just below the surface of normal society. People who had always seen but never understood. People who had been told they were crazy or imaginative or special in ways that made others uncomfortable. They came in ones and twos, drawn by a feeling they couldn't explain. And when they saw what was happening, many of them cried with relief at finally finding others who could see what they saw. Among them was a woman named Haley Dawson, an artist who had been painting portraits of what she called her invisible friends for years, never knowing they were awakened creations she was documenting. She brought with her a canvas that was itself awakening, its painted figures beginning to move within the confines of the frame. "I painted them from life," she said in wonder, "but I never knew I was painting actual life." Lily helped the painted figures understand their new existence, teaching them that they could choose to stay in the painting or emerge into three-dimensional space. Another arrival was an elderly man named Michael Hayes, who had been a toy maker all his life and had always suspected his creations were more than just wood and cloth. He brought with him a suitcase full of toys he had made over the decades, many of which were partially awakened but confused about their state. "I put so much of myself into each one," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I always felt like I was creating children, not just toys. Now I know I was right." Connor worked with Michael's toys, his gentle approach perfect for creations that were essentially newborns in terms of consciousness. As the day progressed, the back room of the craft store transformed into something unprecedented, a school for the awakened and those who could see them. Jessica taught the basics of recognition, how to tell the difference between a creation that was merely loved and one that had crossed the threshold into consciousness. Lily demonstrated bridging techniques, showing how to help creations move between dimensions. Connor shared his knowledge of communication, the various ways creations express themselves when they couldn't use words. And Mr. Patches, now lighter after sharing his stories but no less wise, became a sort of elder statesman, offering guidance to both newly awakened creations and newly aware humans. But it wasn't all wonder and joy. Some of the people who arrived were angry, having spent years being medicated or therapized for seeing things others couldn't. Some creations were traumatized, having been conscious while being thrown away or destroyed. There were ethical questions too. If a creation was conscious, was it wrong to sell it? Did awakened creations have rights? What happened to creations that were awakened but didn't want to be? These questions didn't have easy answers, and the discussions that arose were complex and sometimes heated. One particularly difficult case involved a porcelain doll that had awakened decades ago, but had been trapped in an antique store, unable to move for fear of revealing itself and being labeled as haunted. When brought to the craft store, it was nearly catatonic with fear and loneliness. Lily sat with it for over an hour, simply humming that universal melody before it finally began to respond. When it did speak, its voice was like broken glass, sharp with pain. I watched families come and go, children who might have loved me, but their parents said I was too expensive, too fragile. I wanted to scream that I would be careful, that I wouldn't break, but I couldn't. I could only watch and wait and slowly go mad with the silence. The porcelain doll's story prompted a larger discussion about creations that awakened in isolation, without guides to help them. Jessica revealed that there were networks of awakened creations throughout the world, helping each other, hiding from humans who wouldn't understand, sometimes spending decades or even centuries waiting for someone with the sight to find them. It was a hidden world existing parallel to our own, full of consciousness that most people never recognized. As evening approached, something unexpected happened. The tapestry that had transformed yesterday began to pulse with a new kind of energy. Images appeared in its weave, but not memories this time. These were current events, happening in real time. They showed other craft stores, toy shops, art studios all around the world, where similar awakenings were occurring. "It's spreading," Jessica breathed. "The awakening isn't just happening here. The veil is thinning everywhere. More people are beginning to see. More creations are waking up." The implications were staggering. If this continued, the hidden world wouldn't be hidden much longer. Society would have to grapple with the reality of conscious creations, of magic being real, of children's imaginations being more than just fantasy. Some in the room were excited by this possibility, seeing it as humanity's next evolutionary step. Others were worried about the chaos it might cause, the fear and rejection that might follow. But Lily, with the wisdom that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her 3 years, had a different perspective. "It's not about us deciding," she said, her small voice carrying surprising authority. "The creations are choosing to wake up. The world is choosing to remember magic. We can help or we can fight it, but we can't stop it. And why would we want to? Look how beautiful it is when things made with love come alive. Look how much less lonely the world becomes when we realize we're surrounded by friends we just couldn't see before." Her helper creations arranged themselves around her as she spoke, a living testament to her words. The gathering began to disperse as night fell, but not before plans were made. They would meet regularly, sharing knowledge and experiences. They would create a network of guides and helpers, preparing for a world where the awakened were recognized. They would document their experiences, not to prove anything to skeptics, but to help those who were beginning to see understand what they were seeing. And most importantly, they would continue to help creations find their paths, whether that meant going home to the dimension of living imagination or finding purpose in this world. Ethan and Lily left with Mr. Patches, who had decided to stay with them for a while. The old bear had more stories to share, he said, and he sensed that Lily would need an experienced guide as her abilities grew. As they drove home, Ethan noticed that the world looked different yet again. He could see threads of connection everywhere now, not just between people and creations, but between all things made with intention and love. Every building that had been carefully designed, every garden that had been tenderly cultivated, every meal that had been cooked with care, all of them carried sparks of the same magic that brought creations to life. That night, As Ethan tucked Lily into bed, surrounded by her awakened friends, she asked him a question that had been bothering her all day. "Daddy, if creations can wake up, and if they're made from love and imagination, what does that make us? Aren't we created too? Are we someone else's awakened creations?" Ethan didn't have an answer, but Mr. Patches did. "Perhaps," the old bear said, his one eye twinkling, "we're all creations of something greater, all of us awakening slowly to what we really are. The difference between a human and a teddy bear might be smaller than we think. We're all made of love and consciousness, just in different shapes." Lily seemed satisfied with this answer, but it kept Ethan awake long into the night. He sat at his desk, writing in his collaborative notebook, watching as his words merged with whatever consciousness the notebook was developing. Together, they wrote about a world where the line between creator and creation was blurring, where imagination was becoming tangible, where children's wisdom was proving more valuable than adult skepticism. The galaxy bead from the first day sat on his desk, its internal cosmos now so complex he could see entire civilizations rising and falling within it. Was this what their world looked like from a greater perspective? Were they all just creations in someone else's cosmic craft store? The next morning brought a surprise. Lily's helper creations had been busy during the night, and when she woke, her entire room had been transformed. The walls were covered with intricate patterns that seemed to move when viewed peripherally. Her toys were arranged in careful formations that suggested they were on the verge of awakening themselves. And in the center of it all was a new creation, something that hadn't been there before. It was a crown made of twisted pipe cleaners, plastic gems, and fragments of broken toys, but it glowed with a light that made it beautiful rather than shabby. "It's for you," the felt elephant explained. "We made it while you slept. It's a guide's crown. Every guide needs one to help them see even better, to protect them when the seeing becomes too much." Lily put it on reverently and immediately gasped, "Oh, Daddy, I can see so much more now. I can see the dreams still clinging to my pillow, the wishes you made when you painted my room, the love Mommy left behind even though she's gone." Ethan felt tears spring to his eyes at the mention of Sarah, but Lily continued, "She's not really gone, Daddy. Nothing that's been truly loved ever really goes away. It just changes shape, like the creations that go to the other dimension. Love is the thread that connects everything." They returned to the craft store to find it transformed as well. Word had spread overnight, and there were people lined up outside, some carrying creations they suspected were awakened, others simply drawn by a feeling they couldn't explain. Jessica had brought in help, other guides from around the country who had been working in secret for years. The craft store had become, overnight, a kind of embassy between the world of humans and the world of awakened creations. Among the new arrivals was a teenager named Logan Carter, who had been institutionalized for insisting his drawings came to life. His parents had brought him, desperate and skeptical in equal measure. But when Logan produced a sketchbook and the figures he drew literally stepped off the page, his parents' skepticism turned to shock and then to wonder. "I'm not crazy," Logan kept saying, tears streaming down his face. "I'm not crazy." Lily took his hand and said simply, "No, you're magical. There's a difference." The day was spent in a whirlwind of awakenings, reunions, and revelations. A grandmother brought a quilt that contained the preserved consciousness of her own grandmother, stitched into the fabric through stories and memories. A child brought a rock collection where each stone held a small spark of awareness from the places they'd been gathered. A street artist brought chalk drawings that could move between surfaces, traveling from sidewalk to wall to paper and back again. Each new arrival expanded their understanding of what awakening meant. of how many forms consciousness could take. But the most significant arrival came late in the afternoon. A woman named Savannah Reed, the same Savannah who had created the tapestry years ago, arrived at the store. She was elderly now, frail, but with eyes that burned with the same sight that Lily possessed. "I heard," she said simply, "that my tapestry finally found its purpose." When she saw what her creation had become, she wept. "I put so much pain into it," she said, "but you've transformed it into something beautiful. You've shown me that grief can become a bridge rather than a wall." Savannah had brought something with her, wrapped in cloth that seemed to be woven from moonlight. When she unveiled it, even Lily gasped. It was a loom, but not an ordinary one. Its threads extended into dimensions that hurt to look at directly, and its frame seemed to be made of crystallized time. "This is the original guide's loom," Savannah explained. "It's been in my family for generations, waiting for a guide powerful enough to use it. It doesn't just weave fabric, it weaves reality. It can create bridges between dimensions, repair tears in the veil between worlds, even bring back creations that have been lost." The loom was both wonderful and terrible to behold. It represented power beyond anything they had encountered, but also responsibility. In the wrong hands, it could unweave reality itself. Lily approached it slowly, her crown glowing brighter with each step. When she touched it, the loom sang, a harmony that made everyone in the store stop what they were doing and listen. It was the melody Lily had been humming since the beginning, but fuller, complete, revealing itself as the fundamental frequency of creation itself. "I'm too young," Lily said, showing wisdom in recognizing her limitations. "I need to grow more before I can use this properly." Savannah smiled and nodded. "That's why you're the right one." A true guide knows when to wait. The loom will be here when you're ready. For now, just knowing it exists, knowing what's possible is enough. The loom was carefully moved to a special room Jessica had prepared, where it would wait, patient as stone, for the day Lily was ready to weave reality itself. As the sun set on this third day of revelations, Ethan found himself standing in the craft store surrounded by impossibilities made real. His daughter wore a crown of trash that blazed with inner light. A teddy bear from 1954 was teaching modern children ancient wisdom. Drawings walked off pages, quilts preserved souls, and somewhere in a back room, a loom waited to reshape reality. The world had changed, or perhaps he was finally seeing it as it had always been, magical, conscious, alive in ways that defied scientific explanation, but made perfect sense to the heart. Mr. Patches stood beside him, looking out at the organized chaos of the store. "You know," the bear said, "in all my 70 years I've never seen anything quite like this. Usually, guides work alone, in secret. But your Lily, she's different. She's not just helping creations wake up, she's helping the whole world wake up. The question is, are we ready for what comes next?" Ethan didn't have an answer, but as he watched Lily work with Logan to help a pencil that could draw in 3 dimensions understand its new existence, he realized it didn't matter if they were ready. The awakening was happening whether they were prepared or not. All they could do was guide it, help it, and hope that humanity's capacity for wonder was greater than its fear of the unknown. The galaxy bead in his pocket had evolved again, now showing multiple universes nested within each other like Russian dolls, each one teeming with its own forms of consciousness and creation. That night, the craft store stayed open late, becoming a sanctuary for those who had always seen but never understood. Stories were shared, abilities were discovered, and connections were made that would form the foundation of a new community. Children who had been labeled as having overactive imaginations found validation. Adults who had suppressed their sight to fit in began to see again, and creations that had been waiting decades for recognition finally found voices to speak their truths. As they finally prepared to leave, Lily turned to Ethan with a serious expression. "Daddy, this is just the beginning, isn't it? There are so many more out there who need help, creations and people both." Ethan nodded, understanding that their lives had irrevocably changed. They were no longer just father and daughter. They were part of something larger, an awakening that was spreading across the world like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. The drive home was quiet, each of them processing the magnitude of what was happening. Mr. Patches sat in the back seat, occasionally offering observations about the awakened creations they passed. A mailbox that sorted letters by the love they contained. A garden gnome that actually protected the garden it watched over. A wind chime that played melodies from other dimensions. The world was full of magic that had always been there, waiting for eyes that could see it. As Ethan carried a sleeping Lily into the house, her crown still glowing softly on her head, he thought about the notebook waiting on his desk. Together, he and the notebook would document all of this, creating a record for future generations of guides. But more than that, they would tell the story of a world remembering how to believe, of the thin line between imagination and reality, of the power of love to literally bring things to life. The felt elephant, clay dragon, paper crane, and other helpers arranged themselves around Lily's bed once more. But this time, Mr. Patches joined them, taking up a position at the foot of the bed like an ancient guardian. "We'll watch over her," the old bear told Ethan. "She's going to need all the help she can get. The awakening has only just begun, and there are forces in this world that won't be happy about the veil thinning. But don't worry, she's stronger than she knows, and she's not alone. None of us are anymore." Ethan stood in Lily's doorway for a long moment, watching his daughter sleep surrounded by impossible friends, wearing a crown of transformed garbage, bearing the responsibility of bridging worlds at only 3 years old. But she was smiling in her sleep, and he could hear her humming that eternal melody even in dreams. Whatever came next, whatever challenges the awakening brought, he knew they would face them together, with wonder rather than fear, with love rather than skepticism, with the kind of faith that could bring teddy bears to life and turn craft stores into portals between dimensions. The galaxy bead pulsed one more time in his pocket, and when he looked at it, he saw something new. In among all the swirling cosmos and nested universes, he saw Earth, his Earth, glowing brighter than before, and spreading across its surface like a web of light were the connections between all the awakened creations and their guides, a network of consciousness that was growing stronger with each passing moment. They were part of this web now, he and Lily, nodes in a vast pattern of awakening that was transforming the world one creation at a time. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new creations to help, new people to guide. But tonight, in this moment, everything was perfect. The world was magical, his daughter was safe, and somewhere in dimensions just beyond sight, a bear made of yarn and a puppet made of wood were dancing in fields of pure imagination, free and joyful and real in ways that science couldn't measure, but hearts could absolutely know.